Hello and welcome to Building IQ's 10 on the 10th Tech Podcast Series, where a range of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data science topics are explored in 10-minute episodes each 10th of the month. Today, we are thrilled to speak with Building IQ's President and CEO, Michael Nark. Michael has over 25 years of experience in tech and drives the vision for Building IQ's technology-enabled services around the world. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity.
Michael, you certainly have a wealth of experience in technology that you bring to Building IQ. Tell us, what would you say have been the biggest technology evolutions you have seen over your career that are really driving the building industry today?
Well, certainly, Christine, I think probably the largest has been just the data and data accessibility. And what I mean by the data is essentially just information about how the buildings themselves are operating, and the ability to access that information, not just for a short period of time, but over extended periods, such that significant analysis can be done on them. I think that's number one, the largest happening that's taken place. Secondly, the ability to have computing power to analyze that data and to analyze that data at significant levels has also been a fairly significant transition or change that has taken place. And the two of those together have certainly had a significant impact on buildings themselves and how owners and operators can look at essentially changing how they operate the building. I think the other thing I would mention as well is that one of the largest transitions has probably been frankly, the power of the tenant and the tenant's ability to essentially influence how a building is operated, how a building is set up, and how it is positioned for them to actually gain value out of it as well as a tenant versus just being solely focused around kind of the owner-operator's intention for what they want to do with that asset.
Great. There is a lot of buzz about the Internet of Things and sensors increasing in the building space, with this sort of ultimate vision being intelligent buildings that are optimized, that are responsive to their environment, they're energy efficient. How do you feel we're doing in reaching this goal of intelligent buildings?
Well, I would say we're still very early. I think that's an unfortunate way to look at it, but I do think it is still very, very early. Obviously, the evolution of the IoT and the concept of IoT has been around for quite some time, but the ability to get it to mainstream is still quite far off. I think there's been a lot of work that has been done, consequently with buildings and looking at the buildings as an asset around essentially the digitization of those buildings. So the opportunity to have a control system or a system that allows the building to be managed to maintain temperature or comfort. That's certainly been the major evolution that has transpired over the last, if you will, 15, 20 years. I think, unfortunately, what has not kept up with that, however, has been the way the physical assets in the building have been treated and looked at. So we've essentially focused on digitizing to get the data from the assets themselves, but the assets and their ability to perform over time and proactively managing how those assets perform over time has not necessarily caught up with or kept up with the technology evolution around the digitization piece. And if there's one thing that we certainly need to be focused on and have happen for that smart building to essentially take place and that complete evolution to a smart building to take place, we need both that digitization component as well as that hardware / asset component to take place as well. And so I think that's a major step that we're going to have to take here, and certainly all signs indicate that we're on that path, and the future is very, very bright as it pertains to the digitization being there, but then the follow-up of the evolution of the assets as well to match the two together to create that ultimate smart building.
With an increasingly connected world and more sensors being added and collecting data in buildings, how do these trends influence your vision for the direction you're taking Building IQ services?
Certainly, the opportunities present itself with the availability of the data to drive much more towards the operational benefits that can be derived from a building, Christine. And that's built around essentially the digitization that's happening, the sensor data is coming in. We spoke previously about the opportunities to use that data then to make better business decisions. And what it points to is it highlights opportunities for improvement in the physical assets themselves in the building. And the improvements that can be made in the physical assets of the building itself is really around the airflow and how air is provided, both heated air as well as cooled air, to the building that specifically impacts the tenant space. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we're trying to have a client, as in a client to us, as the owners and the operators of the building, have their clients be satisfied, which is the tenants themselves. And we're seeing a focus around the physical assets and the improvement of the operation of those physical assets being something that is very much able to be influenced, because we do now have, the added value benefit of the sensors and the various IoT devices that are out there to drive that happen. And so what ultimately we have is much more visibility to the physical assets themselves, much more ability to influence and understand where they may or may not be bottlenecking the opportunities for improved comfort in a building, et cetera. So we look to see how we can actually further influence those assets and further drive a benefit out of those assets to drive, obviously, tenant comfort, but to do that in most cost-effective ways from an operational improvement point of view for our clients, the owners and the operators themselves.
Michael, what would be your message to building owners and operators who are looking at technology investments on their path toward intelligent buildings?
I think all too often we find owners and operators who are focused, rightly so, around solving a immediate problem. And most of the time what that immediate problem is that they need to have a management system, a comfort management system or a building management system installed, which fits one need and requirement. But it doesn't necessarily allow them to essentially take that holistic view that says, what can I do with that building management system and the data from that building management system beyond just controlling, if you will, the temperature in the building itself. And so instead of actually looking at that rather large capital decision being made just around one facet of a need inside that building, is to take that much more holistic approach that says, how do I want to operate this building over its life cycle or if its term, and how can I actually equip it appropriately with a building management system, but then also be able to leverage that data for other operational decision making that takes place. And I think the major driver around that is really when you do implement these systems themselves, making sure just simply that the data is available for usage by other parties, other parts of their own organization, to essentially drive more benefit out of that capital investment, and then ultimately drive, obviously, more benefit out of the asset being the building, and ultimately better customer satisfaction, if you will, for the tenants themselves who are essentially leasing space in that building itself. And so it's all about essentially looking at all the benefit that can be derived from that data point versus essentially singularly looking at the one thing you need to do at that point in time, which is put that building management system in. So if we have that much more holistic approach, we can analyze that data from various parties. And the idea being is that analysis can drive a much more holistic approach to the building and essentially obviously drive down operating costs, which improve the overall value of that asset over time for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today on Building IQ's 10 on the 10th Tech Podcast. To listen to other episodes and learn more about Building IQ's technology-enabled services, visit buildingiq.com. Thanks for listening, everyone, and see you next month on the 10th.